All right. Again, I've never done this before. Apparently, I don't know what I'm doing. Hey, so we're live. We did it. We made it to. Where are we?
Devnexus.
Devnexus. Heck yeah, Atlanta, Georgia, the home of barbecue and great conferences and great software.
Sports ball.
Sports ball. They have sports
Yeah.
ball here.
There's
That's
a
the
good
thing.
college. There's a tech college here. It's called Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech. Well, we have several people on the spring team
Yes.
who are from Georgia Tech.
I was a
Rambling wreck
Georgia Tech.
from
I was a
Tech.
rambling wreck from Georgia Tech
Yeah.
back in 1998.
Whoa,
Yeah.
you're
The
from
old days.
the late 20th century.
Late 20th
That's
century.
That's my daughter delights in reminding me.
from last century.
Yeah, like
I just come for the Devnexus and the aquarium.
that's such a good.
It's an impressive aquarium.
It is,
It
yeah.
is. I remember when they built that. So.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
This is my first live stream, and normally I do my live stream early in the morning, so I don't know how many people were going to get to join us today, but because normally I think a lot of the folks join me early in California time because it's end of day Europe, and evening in Asia. It's they're at a place where they can join me. Here it's end of day East Coast, so
it's really end of day Europe.
yeah. Oh, they're
Yeah.
asleep.
Yeah.
Getting
yeah.
around. But we'll see. I think we can have fun. I appreciate you all joining me.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
This is so
Wouldn't
cool.
miss it.
But anyway, I came here. Like I said, I came here for the barbecue, and for the that basically. There's a conference, I guess. There's that as well.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah, that's
Devnexus thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Largest dev conference in the U.S. now, I think,
Oh, wow.
after Java 1.
it's well, even I think bigger.
Well, it is now. Yeah,
it's bigger. It's I would have said so. Spring One got bigger than Java One a long time ago, right? But like we haven't done a proper in-person Spring One since before the virus, right?
Sure.
Since 2019. So we'll see
Yeah.
how things go. I expect to be fine, but my point is, all we know is that right now this is the biggest in-person event
Absolutely. Yeah.
that like last year in the state that we had. There was OSCON do you remember there was an OSCON Java for a
Yeah.
minute?
Yeah.
It was fun.
I remember the last OSCON because Tim O'Reilly got up, and it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen in his keynote, where he's sitting there next to the two platinum sponsor banners, and it's Amazon and Google, and together they must have spent collectively like $500,000 or something before the MPOs. Who knows what they spent? And Tim O'Reilly spends the first 10 minutes of his keynote just trashing both of them and their relationship with open source communities and what they've been doing. Oh, he just went off. I was like, you're my hero, man. You just took $500,000 from these folks, and you spent the first 10 minutes of the conference just dragging them.
Well, I guess there's nowhere to go but up from there. Right?
That's true.
That's good.
It was the last OSCON, so.
That's true.
Was
Yeah,
the last
that is true. Yeah, I like this. It's a nice
It
conference.
was a great show.
Yeah.
It was a great show. Yeah.
I don't mean to did you ever get to the food camp?
No,
I did one.
No. Was it any good? Yeah.
That was the Friends of O'Reilly invite only thingy. And I met the the last term president of Estonia.
Oh wow.
I met Governor Jerry Brown.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like pretty.
That's legit.
Yeah. And actually, I met there's a weird confluence of things that I met there too. Is they had a young man who, well, I guess he wasn't that young anymore, but when he was younger, he allegedly, I don't even know if I don't remember if he was convicted or not, but he was very young, and it was obviously clearly something that, there was an argument to be made that he probably shouldn't have been punished so disproportionately as he was. And I think he shot somebody or something like that. It was not good. Don't shoot people, obviously.
If you take one thing from this podcast today.
Yeah, that's good. But nonetheless, his life was ruined.
Yeah, sure.
Because of this, and it was ruined before he even got a chance to be a man and be a person, be a human being.
Yeah.
Right, and he hurt somebody else and he hurt himself. It was really bad. So after, I don't know, 15 years, whatever, in prison, Governor Brown commuted his sentence or whatever, something like that, right? Because remember, there was a whole, I don't know if you remember Moonbeam. Governor Moonbeam. Jerry Brown was called Governor Moonbeam in the 70s.
Oh, God,
and he was kind of a hippie,
Yeah.
Lucy left wing guy, except that he had this really strong. The one exception to that was he had this really strong sort of take on crime. He prosecuted people very unjustly, and I think it was one of the things he regretted. So when he got his second term, 30 odd years hence, he came back and he undid a lot of that. He commuted people's crime sentences. He helped start the process to get people out of prison for marijuana crimes, which was now no longer a crime in the state of California. So that was one thing. That was one dimension, and he was there. But then that young man was in prison, and O'Reilly had apparently donated, like, you know how O'Reilly has these online courses.
Yeah.
They had how did this work? Oh, I guess in the there's no internet in prison, right? So they donated these courses to be run locally.
Wow.
Yeah. And
wow.
So all these people could rehab by studying to learn programming and all that kind of stuff, right? Cool. So this, yeah, exactly. It's really cool.
Yeah, really good way to rehab. Yeah.
This young man studied to be a programmer and had skills, and his sentence was commuted. And so here he was at this conference, O'Reilly's conference, where he got his skills, and to meet Jerry Brown, who commuted his time.
Wow.
And it was just like, whoa.
Yeah, no, seriously. That's
full circle, man.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
That's a good on a PR.
Well, it's also a good thing. The young man,
Now, Steve, you're a security guy.
Oh, right. Who are you? I forgot. We were just talking.
I was kind of jump right into it.
Sorry. What are you doing on my couch? Get out of here.
Well,
security.
I came to clean the room, but
sorry.
So
ever.
So my name is Steve Poole.
Nice to meet you.
Me too. I work for Sonatype. I'm the director of the DevRel group there.
Yes.
Sonatype are the people who provide Maven Central.
Oh.
And most of the Java developers watching will probably be using Nexus, which is the Nexus repo, which is the other thing, and a bunch of other tools that we do. But the most obvious thing of things are Maven Central. So I'm there. I was at Red Hat for about a year.
Cool.
And then I was at IBM before then for 28 years. So
cool.
Because it was fun.
Yeah.
But that's what I wanted to ask you as a security guy, though. If you are already like a criminal, if you're in jail, and if you're learning to program, are you a cyber criminal?
Ha ha.
Har.
Is that a dad joke?
That's pretty bad.
Boner in 5 different minutes.
So the thing is we do know there's a lot of evidence that says a lot of I would say cyber criminalists, but I'm not sure what the right word is.
Okay.
The cyber criminologist?
No,
those
that commit cyber crime.
Cyber criminals.
So there is evidence that a lot of the cyber criminalists,
criminals,
are already doing some other sort of crime, and they literally learn to program.
That's interesting. Okay, so we're not completely off base.
So I have done all stats, but I know that one of the things that's been said quite often is that when they do bust crime rings, they'll have a bunch of criminals who are doing drugs or whatever it is they're doing, and then they'll have some side issue with doing cybercrime. So there's definitely an aspect to that. And then, of course, you've got all the modern attackers who are professional IT guys, and they're, some of those are going to have been subverted to the dark side.
Sure.
But some of them will have, learnt it specifically. Yeah.
So
there's some truth to that.
Yeah.
But you're saying that, okay, don't do crime. We're still saying that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it hasn't changed since a minute ago when we were talking about.
I'm on the fence. I'm not gonna say don't do crime.
Wait,
maybe there are some that sometimes it's honorable.
No. Wait. Let's just say, unless otherwise notified, don't do crime.
Yes.
Okay.
Fair.
Unless it was like,
you can make the blanket statement, but there may be some exceptions.
Maybe we don't even know, and as far as we know, there aren't, and except for the removing a tag from a mattress.
That's it. What?
It's
federally prosecuted. I mean, apparently, I don't know. I've never actually had I've committed lots of other crimes. I've never committed that crime. I feel like it's so well stated. There's ambiguity. Oh no, as people know me.
What's going on?
But
I want a refund. Wait.
Yeah, this
is going well.
Yeah. Let's keep digging. Yeah.
You're so not related to crime.
Yeah.
You were at IBM.
Yes.
Awesome. What'd you do there?
JVMs.
Oh, I love JVMs. You know, the Java's going to be big. I've got a hunch.
I think this thing's really going to take off.
Yeah. No, I started in the Java team just after it arrived at IBM, but I've been involved
with Jikes and stuff.
Yeah, before then. Yeah,
Okay.
so 0.9. I always say I've been doing Java since before it was 1.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, and so pretty much that's what I did. JVMs and
I have
JVMs.
questions.
Yeah,
I have many questions.
Push.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Jikes and J9.
Yeah.
Is there any connection?
No.
How did we get what? There's been 2 different amazing JVMs.
Oh, at least 2. We did more than 2.
Oh, I'm sure. AIX had its own.
So J9 was the one that was developed at IBM from the team that came from, we bought from OTI. That's the name of the company.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So they came in with I think it was K8, and then they had the next one, which became J9, which was, I think that's right. But IBM had a bunch of other groups doing JVMs. We had different platforms, different hardware. So it was all, there's some fairly clean root stuff like that.
Really? So I've been doing Java for more than 20 years, but that's still not the entire sweep of Java's history.
Yeah.
And even in my relatively short career, I can remember 2 different commercial grade.
Yeah.
You can buy it now or download it now. JVMs from IBM. And you're saying they had no relationship to each other. That's phenomenal.
Well, there were others.
Like the Oracle JVM has always just been the one that they made, or the Sun JVM, whatever. Okay.
But that was a massive. So I don't know. I'm probably forgetting the history here too. But
It's a long time ago.
the IBM JVM was for what? Was it for the IBM I platform and for?
Because there was one for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We had ones. Well, because at the end, and I did this up, and I reckon we were like 20-something platforms.
Okay.
So
Well,
different
people keep
OS,
scooping up.
so different OSs,
truly
different
right one.
architectures, and then different chips, different bit sizes, stuff like that. So
It's such a massive machine.
yeah. So we had so there were ones on the mainframe, there were ones on iSeries and stuff like that, and some were related and some were not. So it was just a matter of, in some ways, it was how easy was it to port? Because obviously, at the end of the day, you take a code base and you port.
Yeah,
sure. Well, I mean, especially the native C++ bits at the bottom. Yeah.
It's at the end of the day, isn't it? That's the ironic thing is that because you'd have people join my team. Go, how to write Java? We go, well, we don't really do that. We don't C and C++ machine language.
Yeah.
So which came first? Was it out of a like
What?
late? was it out of
Here, chicken.
You heard it right here. Was it chicken? Yeah. So was it? So you had you have the WebSphere project. You had all the IBM commercial JEE stuff or J2EE stuff as it were back then. Was it out of a necessity for IBM to try to control everything down to the JVM level that some of these were adopted, or did the JVMs come first and then there was an investment in J2EE?
Well, just trying to remember. The primary thing is like all this stuff is like, if you're what's your business model? You're providing some high quality software, so it's going to be performant, and you've also got to provide support for this. So it's usually in your best interest to have the whole stack so that you can control it.
Sure.
Because then you can optimize across the whole stack, and you can then provide support because it's your code. I mean, the thing is that as we look at we're in this wonderful industry of open source, but actually, from a commercial point of view, you don't really want to do open source. You do it for other reasons, but mostly you do. You want having a closed model where you're completely controlled it is what you really want
As a business.
as a business.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Gives you more leverage.
Yeah.
So what was the genesis of Jikes then?
So there was a research project. So IBM has an enormous research group.
Yeah.
And when Java came out, there was this Cambrian explosion within IBM, and everybody was going, we're going to use Java. And then the research teams were out figuring out to make it faster, and Jikes was one of those outputs. There was all sorts of stuff
that was a commercial JVM at some point, or am I getting that wrong?
No, it wasn't. No,
Okay.
It was
just research.
Yeah, it was just research. But then it got open sourced.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then J9 was an acquisition.
Yes.
Okay. And then Jikes also, I remember, being really fast. Like it wasn't necessarily always up to date, but I remember there was a time when it was like the really, really fast one.
Yeah.
And
But
then
that was
J-Rocket
because
came out. Years
yeah,
later.
and there was some trade-offs, as always.
Sure.
Yeah, so the original compiler native thing before we had Gradle,
Yeah.
it was a hard thing, and there were a lot of corners cut. No, that's the wrong way of putting it. There were deliberate decisions about what you were going to support, what you weren't, you know. And way back in the midst of Java, there was this point where people were going, well, we can't support JVMs, they're too slow, so let's do a compiler native thing. And so there was that branch of history. Well,
Excelsior. I remember that.
yeah,
And
there was a whole bunch of them coming up. Most of them not particularly good, because it's actually really hard to do.
Well, didn't J++ purport to do something like that?
I don't remember.
From Microsoft.
Yeah,
who remembers?
I just remember adding extras. The whole embrace and extend period. Yeah,
that was colorful time in the history.
Yeah.
Okay, so JVMs turns out they're gonna be big, and no small part thanks to you.
Yeah.
And who are you?
Oh, I do a little of this, a little of that. So I'm Justin. I'm field CTO over at Gradle. My background is primarily in writing code. I wrote code for a long time, then moved into more enterprise architecture, and then was running a team of enterprise architects for a while. Always gravitating towards like open source in the enterprise. And then a couple of years ago, Gradle came across my LinkedIn looking for somebody who wanted to evangelize and be a field CTO for this emerging practice called developer productivity engineering, or DPE. And I hadn't heard of that before. And I looked into it and I was like, this is what I want to do. Looking back at a lot of the stuff that I've been doing around open source, it was always about developer productivity, right? I mean, it's get your hands on high quality software quickly and get to work and don't worry about all the red tape and bureaucracy, right? So it was easy to transition then to talking about just a pure productivity practice. And then Steve and I did our first talk together at Fuji Day, JConf in Chicago last year.
Yeah. We tried to do one earlier, but we didn't. But it didn't work. Yeah, timing. Yeah,
we could have met each other.
At Fuji, I literally, so I came in, did the talk with Steve, then flew out the afternoon to another show. I don't remember which one. But so there is, all this nice overlap between the work that Sonatype is doing in terms of trying to improve developer security without impacting productivity as much as possible.
Right.
And then, of course, the work that we're doing at Gradle, which is all about accelerating productivity through engineering. So tomorrow, we're going to go give a talk at Devnexus kind of about that. So Steve is going to say, hey, these are modern security practices that you need, that you no longer, there's no longer a question, right? You must do this if you want to be a responsible.
Productive security.
Yeah. But you don't have to sacrifice productivity if you are balancing that with a good productivity strategy. So yeah, that's where I came from, what I do. So I run the advocacy team at Gradle, provide some enablement for our sellers, and mostly do PowerPoint.
But you were on the show before.
I was.
I
was on Beautiful podcast.
Yeah. This is the podcast. This will be an episode of the podcast. We're just live streaming it now.
Oh, got you.
I'm crossing the streams, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna use this on YouTube, and then I'll just strip out the video and put that on the podcast this week, probably.
Got you.
Or maybe not. I don't know. But eventually it'll get released as a podcast. So, thank you for the free content.
Oh, it's fun.
I love them on. They pay people that go on to like the late night show like $500.
Isn't that crazy?
But that's real money.
Platform. It is. Yeah.
Did we get paid for this?
I made you buy me the coffee today.
Yeah.
Oh, look, that's true. He did.
Yeah. I made him buy me the coffee.
Yeah.
Not only did we not give you a $500 stipend each for coming, but I made you buy coffee. It was
Well,
you need the exposure.
Yeah, I do. I need the platform, frankly. So
sure. Yeah, right. Okay. So this whole, when you talk about productivity, what are some of the key specifics that we can talk about that are when I think of productivity, I think of a lot of different things. What are some of the things that might otherwise be thought to be diminished by the need for security? Things that you would strive for, but for security.
So, and Steve, you probably do a better job.
So I was going to say, the reason we have this conversation is because we were talking about it was this weird sort of, we had this sort of anti-epiphany. We were talking about how do we structure this talk, and then we were talking about why we're doing it, and then we got into the subject of, because I was saying I talk to developers about security, and they're always going, productivity is important, and I talk to them, and one of the things they say is you should write security tests for the components that you use.
Yeah.
Because you should be making sure that that it still behaves the way you expect. Not like you don't write thousands of tests, but you write some. And you talk to developers and they go, no, my manager wouldn't let me do that. Wouldn't let me write tests for the components that I'm choosing. And in fact, some of them had said, oh, once we prove the security tests work, like the OAuth stuff works, we turn them off because my manager says it gets in the way of productivity.
You mean during development, not production, of course.
Yeah.
Oh.
So it's these extra steps, extra cognitive work.
We have this developers literally being told don't focus on security, and then we have this big looming cloud coming down, which is all about cyber attacks and what's happening in that space, which is making the problem worse. But developers are actually reducing their security in the aid of productivity. So we were talking about how you explain to developers this is a bad thing. How do you show them that they need to invest in productivity, and how do you show them that they can actually be productive and safe at the same time?
Okay.
So that's literally what we're trying to construct as a talk.
Now I only have one rule in the show.
Yeah.
And that is to not make Spring Security Lead Rob Winch sad. And I feel like we're already doing that. So let's turn this thing around. How do we? What are some specific ideas of productivity where people are saying security should take a back seat, and then what are some things we can do to put it back in the front seat?
Well, so think about the tests, for instance, right? So you're coming up with a whole bunch of tests. One of the things that we do in developer productivity engineering, one of the techniques that we recommend is something called predicted test selection, which uses machine learning to look at a history of how changes to the code base have impacted tests in the past, and tries to predict, hey, is this test probably just going to succeed under these conditions? Because if it is, don't bother running it. Pre-merge. Post-merge, run everything. Pre-merge, though, you can skip this stuff, right? So that's one example, right? Okay, we may have additional tests now that have to be run as part of the set, and that might make the build or the cycle time longer. But if we optimize the test set, then we'd actually bring in the cycle time and only be running the tests that we know are going to be relevant for the current context.
Oh, wow. So is that on CI when you do a pull request?
It's actually local.
Yeah. So you're also the AI is monitoring your code locally?
So this is a technique that was developed by Meta and Google, and they released a white paper back in 2019 called Predictive Test Selection. You can look at it. It's in the Facebook research section. I think we talked a little bit about it maybe in the last podcast. Yeah, because it's like the third leg of the acceleration technology. You got caching, test distribution, and predictive test selection.
I see.
Yeah. It came out of the labs of Meta and Facebook, but it uses the XGBoost library, which, if you're familiar at all with the machine learning libraries, is not a deep learning library. It's a gradient boosted decision tree model. So it uses a regular CPU. It doesn't need a GPU or anything like that. But it can be super effective. It's like, okay, we have to add these additional testing steps, and that's going to increase our cycle times. But we can use another technique to balance that, optimize it, right? And potentially even make it even shorter than it was before. And we can also look at things like caching, we have build caching, we have test distribution. And then there's also the whole reliability aspect of this stuff too. What if these security tests are acting flaky, right? Can you rely on them? And what kind of analysis can you do to make sure that the tests you're running are valuable?
Right.
Yeah.
So
okay. So that's amazing. And I think we my brain
overloaded.
Yeah, we had one of your distinguished competitors focusing on just that.
That is true.
On the show.
Yeah, I want to say maybe was it Engflow, maybe Build Buddy, Launchable. Was it Launchable?
Kosuke Koga,
yeah,
the guy who created Jenkins.
That's yep. Launchable's got a really nice approach, actually. I can't say anything bad about their tech. It's good. It's a good implementation and predictive. It's a little too bound to CI, in my opinion, but we have the luxury of working for Gradle. right there at the build tool level, we have our integration. So
Nice. And I'm sure there's something similar.
Yeah,
On the
I mean,
Sonatype side?
I was thinking, what do we offer? So one of the things that you have is obviously dependency management. So how much time and effort do you spend fixing vulnerabilities? So what Sonatype's got is because we run Maven Central, and we've got a whole bunch of other data analysis going on.
Right.
We're looking at the behavior of the ecosystem. And so we can all, and again, because we've got the Java code, we can look at like breaking changes. So we can look at the different versions of root dependency. So we're now working on adding into Maven Central more advice, so that when you select,
Oh, wow.
so when you select a component, you don't just go, I mean, it's like, hey, I want a left path thing. Okay, so I Google for it. I go to Maven Central to get the coordinates, to get the latest version, I plug it in, I'm done. But now we're saying, for a whole bunch of other reasons, when you choose a version or even just a component, you've got to be much more savvy about why you're choosing it. And one of the things that we can do, and this is just a productivity point of view, is to go, look, there are 5 versions. Picking the latest version might be your first choice, but it might actually not be the most optimal one, because we may have evidence that shows that other people have moved to that and moved off, right? Because we can see the patterns of behavior. So what we're trying to do is codify that and quantify it. So there's some experimental tools on Central you can go play with, trying to give people information so that when you choose something, you have a lot of good advice. It's like there are 3 versions. 90% of the population choose that one. And also because we can see, for instance, that if you have a sequence of versions, and we can see that the population, most of the Java developers chose this version, and then 5 minutes later chose another version, you can reckon that probably that first version's not a good one.
Who chooses the version, then 5 minutes later chooses another?
Because
How catastrophic does the
because
bug?
it's yeah.
You start it up, it's like, oh well, that's my computer's on fire.
Sometimes it's simple, as in just the dependency of that dependency is
it's
not good, and so you have all that sort of churn. So productivity, just simply being more conscious of how you choose software, how you choose dependencies. So that's one thing.
That's good that it's built into the process too. But I always go back to also, and it's like, yes, developers, or at least the knee-jerk reaction is, more security, it's going to be harder to do my job. And it's always been that trade-off, between like security and productivity. But I think that what is the biggest productivity killer is the announce of a public vulnerability. I mean, every Java shop in the world stopped everything they were doing for a week when Log4Shell hit, and it was a productivity nightmare. So it's like, okay, you're going to pay it forward a little bit here, but
and what we noticed with Log4j, because Log4j. So here's the horrible statistic: is even now, 30% of the versions of Log4j downloaded from Maven Central are vulnerable versions.
Yeesh.
Yeah, right. And we have a nice dashboard. You can go see the horror story. But hidden away in that is there's this lovely little bit of data that shows that for a fraction of the world, they updated within, hours, and they were done. Yeah. And then there was a load of other people that were later. And when you talk to developers about it, there were a lot of anecdotal evidence of, you ask people how many people who was affected, and you get the horror stories. And a lot of them were developers coming in, being asked to address the problem, and didn't even know where to start because they'd never had to worry about discovering where there's dependency deployed and stuff like that.
So that was an interesting thing. We sat on the Spring team as I am. We don't enable it. We don't enable Log4j by default. You get Sonatype. So So there was a huge freak out, a huge panic. Obviously, the whole world broke out in hysterics on the news of this vulnerability. And the first thing we had to do was like, unless you opted in, you're probably fine. And you have to teach people how to like look at their dependency.
And then that gets you into the other challenge for this is the SCA tools out there, software composition analysis tools that you use to work out what you've got are variable. Right? because you pay your money, you get your choice, and you can get really simple ones or you can get really good ones. But because they are seen as just tools to fix a chore,
Right.
nobody has ever really, companies only assess them from that point of view. How good is this tool finding a bug? What's the data like? I don't know. What does the company invest in? How deep does it scan?
Right.
And I always say, hey, write some tests. You're a Java developer. You can figure out how to hide a class in a class file.
Right.
So do that and see if these tools can find it.
Yeah.
And so again, these are all important things to do. But in terms of the talk we're doing, we're going, they all get in your way.
Yeah.
There are brighter, better ways of running your life as a developer that doesn't involve these panicky things. You could just be more considered. Yeah. And again, we got, because of what we've got with Maintenance Central, we've got good evidence coming out of this, and we've also been working. A lot of people working with the Linux Foundation. So, as you can imagine, because of the executive order last year, was it last year, year before?
It was the year before,
Yeah,
I think. Jesus.
which was let's fix the problem.
Yeah.
The big foundations are getting involved and are working out what are reasonable checks to apply. So
Wait, what executive order?
The White House mandate to provide a software bill of materials for anybody who's using open source.
the executive order, the only one we care about. Yeah. So you have the executive order. So the thing is, governments don't understand software.
Really?
Yeah. Right. And so they treat it as
It's
goods.
not a big truck. It's a series of tubes.
Yeah. But they don't. They treat it as commodity. They treat. That's what we have all this supply chain conversation, because it's all about supply chains. So they have a big stick, and the big stick is, I'm going to make it your problem. You are not allowed to deliver software with vulnerabilities in, and that's going to be your problem. And so that then gets you into, how do you assess this? How do you make sure that you're progressing? And so everybody's working, when I say Linux Foundation, CNCF, OpenSSF, all those guys are working on what makes a reasonable set of checks to assess somebody. So we're working with those. We've got our own ideas because we've got the own data.
So this is just for open source, or what is this?
No, basically for open source.
If you're using open source, which everybody.
But the rules, the thing is, it turns out the rules applies to everybody. Because what it shows is good engineering practices keep you safe.
But what is the rule is what? What is the rule?
So the rules are simple things like, do you have a security MD file?
MD mark that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. In the GitHub repo or something.
Yeah. So that gets you 1 point.
Okay.
It's that sort of thing. Through to things like, do you do code review?
Okay.
So there's I don't know, it's about 10, 15 different of these variations. It's all about basically good security practices.
Sure. And the mandates is keeping a software bill of materials too, which is why that SBOM thing blew up so acutely.
Yeah. So SBOMs are, well, they're not the panacea, but they're such a great medicine, because an SBOM gives you better insight into the details of the things you're using.
Yeah.
So it's easier you don't have to worry too much about whether the scanning tools are any good, because you've actually got a bill of materials that tells you what you've got. Caveats, they were cool.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So that's like, everybody's going to produce SBOMs, and then eventually everybody will have to fulfill these criteria, and then there's a whole bunch of rules coming around automating everything, because they want no human beings. The ideal solution is that when you create a release of software, human being presses the button to initiate it, but every single step is automated. Because if you allow a human being involved, then it could be compromised.
So you're talking about continuous delivery at that point?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But actual continuous delivery.
Right. Not. Well, I mean, gated behind a big green button. That's it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And with an evidence chain.
With it. Yeah. So that's the other word you'll hear: evidence, audit trails, proof. Have you got a vulnerability process? A whole bunch of what in a good software engineering practices. But now where this is going to trickle down, and a bunch of software engineers or eventually who haven't been used to this are going to get this. Is going to become part of their life. I mean,
so when does it take effect?
So soon, next year, 2000.
So every company that uses open source.
No. So the rule. So
the rule?
The first gate is, if you want to supply software to the US government.
Okay.
That's the first gate. The EU have their own thing they're trying to do, and I'm not quite sure what. I mean, there's on an accelerated timescale, but I'm not sure what the details are about who's going to be affected. But it's the beginning of it, right? And of course, if you're supplying software to the US government, then whatever software you've got, and eventually whatever services you use, are going to be required to do that. You can see it's going to trickle down. The whole intent of this is that you have to fix the supply chain. So not just the software supply chain, the whole physical supply chain.
But to your point too about the quality of the tools, we have to be careful, right? Because there's a little bit of a Goodhart's paradox emerging here, where it's like, okay, you will be allowed to continue to provide software to the government if you check these boxes.
Yeah.
But we have no idea that the box that you checked was checked in a high quality way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who guards the gatekeeper?
Yeah. So let's say you're providing a library that prints out some really high quality ASCII artwork on the console, right? And you're doing it, and it's a dependency that you've released. It's on GitHub, it's Apache 2 licensed, and you've released it onto Maven Central with no intent that anybody from the government should pick it up.
Yeah. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. Sorry, it's not your problem.
Yet.
No. The subtlety is that the open source project itself doesn't have to do the work.
Okay.
Whoever's
But
implementing.
the person who takes your code and supplies it is the person on the hook.
The aggregator.
So the EU, what the EU are trying to do is they're trying to apply the same rules as they would apply to like physical devices. So I say that the analogy would be like, if you shipped a car and the airbags didn't work and you knew they weren't working, you'll be liable. So what they're trying to get is to make you liable for shipping software with known vulnerabilities. That's the first state they want to get to.
But aren't there always
Known and published.
You know, no, that you know. You'd have to prove you didn't know that had vulnerabilities.
Which you could theoretically do by saying, oh, well, we scanned it using whatever tool and it didn't come up with anything, so we're not liable.
Yeah.
But that's where the Goodhart comes in.
That's you wave hands on how that's all gets.
well, but even there, like what about vulnerabilities are a lot of times you get vulnerabilities that are raised that are just nonsense because they don't actually apply to they're just user.
Yeah.
If you did this, then yes, you're vulnerable, but that's just like saying if you open the door, it's gonna get colder, you know.
But you're not exploitable necessarily.
Yeah, it's not like just because it's possible to use this software in a particular way doesn't mean my software
I agree. Okay, we're not even talking.
Yeah.
This is the intent, and then there's the whole detail about what happens if that vulnerability is not applicable. What happens if that vulnerability's got a low score?
Right.
And then what does knowing mean? Does that know, or is it somebody else assessing you? I mean, I have no idea whether these details are in there. I suspect not.
We need lawyers. Next
Lots
guest
of
is lawyers.
Yeah.
Dev lawyers.
There you go.
Yeah, let's train developers to be lawyers. Yeah.
Wait, no.
Oh, God.
Lawyer.
Well, it's probably easier than training lawyers to be developers, to be honest.
Lawyer next.
Yeah.
That's the next conference.
Yeah.
Lawyer
And Steve and Glenn get on.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, wait, so this is terrifying.
Yeah.
But it's also pretty good because
So do you want to know why we're doing this?
no, of course, yes, I do. But it's in the surface of a terrible thing. Is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But also, it reminds me of that. I'm just a little worried because now they sent that poor. They got that whoever the Volkswagen emissions scandal.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like, well, yes, the engineers were in the process, but they shouldn't have taken the lion's share of the blame. It was not just them. Right? It was clearly they were being directed.
You should have checks and balances.
Yeah,
and
there's a
auditing.
systemic issue here. And I'm worried it's going to be, this is just a way of making engineers scapegoats. Again.
The thing is, this isn't really a problem that we want to dodge.
Sure. No, you're right.
Yeah,
We should definitely address it.
Yeah.
But
as you're right, but it needs
Sick.
to be addressed in a way that is achievable.
Yeah.
You don't want people to have wiggle room, but then you don't want to put too much of a load on them, which is why we ended up with this thing about, well, these developers are going to get a lot of chores. Some developers are going to get it now, some in 10 years' time, but it's coming.
But it's the company that gets held liable, not the individual developer.
I believe it'll be some particular role when the company gets held liable. It's the same as if,
But it's not like, if there's prosecution involved, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like somebody working for an LLC or some court.
But you imagine you're working in a company and you're delivering software, and now somebody in that company is criminally liable,
right,
if you ship known vulnerabilities.
So not the company is.
Yeah, because I don't know about the
individual
US,
in the
but
company is criminally liable.
you-
Okay, that is different. That is actually.
we are not lawyers, by the way.
Yeah, we're not.
No, we're not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Not by.
Yeah.
We're just.
we're just shooting the shit.
Yeah.
No idea what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Literally nothing.
He does.
Well, so-
But Okay, so that's interesting to know, right? I mean, whether one person could be held criminally liable, even if they work for a corporation, for knowingly shipping log4j 1.2.16 or whatever. But then, I mean, because you can think like, okay, the company gets held liable, they get sued, they obviously fire the person, right? I mean, that's the natural order of things. But now we're saying that this person could actually be held individually accountable for criminal charges.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Color me nervous.
Yeah, I'm gonna get into sculpting.
Yeah.
Well,
we
what
read that.
What did the
manual.
answer? You don't sell.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, then that's actually a huge sector for a lot of. I'm sure you.
And because everybody's connected to everybody, this trickles down.
Yeah.
Because it isn't. Because what happens? You may go. So if you're the supplier to the government, then everything that you get, you are responsible too.
Right.
Sure.
Right. So and so you may be buying software or service for somebody else. Right. And we haven't even talked about what happens when we talk about like software services, because nobody's got their head around that. So this whole conversation is not fully baked, and there's for the last 2 years easy. There have been significant conversations with the biggest companies and the governments and military and trying to work out what makes sense, because nobody wants to come up with a policy that we pay lip service to because the problem's too important to fix.
Sure, we need to fix it.
Yeah,
and to be honest with you, I work at a place where we've always had this very strong culture of doing that. I didn't realize there's a new order. To be honest with you, I just didn't. I might have known that a couple years ago when Log4j was still fresh in our minds, but we've just always had that, right? And now I realize that that must have been really hard for people to learn that.
Yeah,
I don't know, because it's been so long since I didn't know that stuff.
Yeah,
that I'm now starting to worry.
The horrible yardstick now is that generally, again, if I talk to people and you ask them, you get if the company's been hacked, then they know exactly what to do and they focus on it. If they've not been hacked, then
there's no urgency.
Yeah, because it's one of those things. It's a weird thing. It's like playing Russian roulette with a cylinder, with 1,000 bullets in it or 1,000 empty chambers. It's like you keep pulling the trigger because you think hasn't happened yet.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Don't do that. What did we say in the very beginning of the show?
Yeah. No violence. No crime,
Yeah.
except for crime that may not be crime later.
I recanted. No crime at all. Period. Just be good.
Except, I think you said it is okay to cut the tag off the mattress.
No, I regret everything. I don't think I even did that. It was an accident. I tripped and fell on the scissors.
Likely story.
Yeah.
Shouldn't run with scissors.
Or I just stay home.
Just stay home. Stay home. Stop coding.
Get off the computer.
Because you're going to get arrested immediately if you code now, because everything's vulnerable.
Just read a book.
Why are we even going to Devnexus? I feel like we should just go home. This is it's a terrifying place over there. It's a sea of toxicity and violence and criminality.
Yeah, don't do anything. Yeah, stay home.
Just stop what you're doing right now. Stop coding. Go outside. It's a beautiful day.
I don't want to go to prison for.
No.
I don't know enough about. This is the thing, is I don't know enough about security. I know the basics.
So right now, all I can tell you is my understanding it's knowingly shipping vulnerabilities.
Yes.
Right. And which we will add all the caveats of we don't know how that would be checked. We don't know what the rules would be about levels, because CVEs are scored by human beings. So there's all sorts of opportunities to hide this. And in fact, the other thing is that you're supposed to provide an SBOM.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a standard format for an SBOM, or maybe depends?
Yeah, no, they selected government Cyclone DX and SPDX are the two they've said. There's at least one more. So there's quite a few.
Sorry, what were the ones?
So SPDX, which you will have heard about, probably if you've done some sort of license management. And the other one is Cyclone DX, which is an XML-based one. But
Brevity. When you want brevity, go XML.
Yeah. Well,
not kidding.
The current SPDX is the 2.0 version, which is based on this one that you'd seen, which is all the single line records.
Right.
But they're developing a new version, which is designed to be an SBOM. So when version 3 comes out, we'll have something that's useful. the Cyclone DX has always been designed as an SBOM.
Okay.
So, it's just an XML tagging thing. But at the end of the day, they're just mechanical ways of representing SBOMs, and eventually they'll be interchangeable.
Where does this representation, where does this manifest? Where does this thing live in this? Like what is it? Let's say I'm a government and I'm buying a database. Do I hand over the binary, the tarball for the database, and then this SBOM?
Yes.
Separate?
And some way of proving that the SBOM
Is tied to the
is
integrity.
tied to that, yeah. So you will hear
something.
about SIG stores, which are sort of related to that. That's the other thing, because the other people are going, well, where do I put the keys for this? How do I prove there's digital signature for these things? So now we'll
whole ledger SIG store
Yeah,
thing is
yeah.
coming
So
in.
the
Doors.
SIG store.
SIG store. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
There's a CNCF group around that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
people are trying all kinds of weird stuff.
Yeah,
There's
so
SIG store, there's Persia.
it's like SBOMs. We now currently SBOMs are generated with after the fact. So you create an artifact, you apply a tool, you get an SBOM. Well, that's okay, but it's as good as the tool is. So if the tool is not very good at understanding what you built, right? So it's okay. So the tool may be close to your build process, but I could, in theory, you can give me a jar, and I can apply an SBOM tool to it, and it's going to tell me whatever it can work about on that jar. If I've got a POM, then I can actually build a tree of dependencies. So it depends on the information, it depends on the tools.
I was going to say some of this is
Yeah.
a jar is one thing, but what about a Gradle? If you have a native image, you're going to have to do the build.
Yeah.
Build that Gradle upon that.
Yeah. What about Golang? Yeah. So what's the SBOM look for that? If you build it after the fact, well,
Right.
you don't get to see all the source code that came in.
statically linked?
Yeah. So you can see there's a lot of work to be done to turn these SBOMs into something useful. Right now, most of them are post-processing, and that still means there's a gap.
It's problematic. Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be.
Because
You're right.
you can create an object, compile it, zip it up. Yeah, somebody can insert some malware, and then you create an SBOM. So there's still a thing. So the nirvana is the compilation tools, the packaging tools will spit out SBOMs as or
Which would be, I'm on the record as saying Gradle should be doing this. Everyone, I've been yelling about it for 2 years.
the other option, which is probably more pragmatic, is that just like when GDPR came out and we started, and everybody went, oh, we can't do this, it's too much hard work. And then companies started turning up saying, we'll do it for you. You can see that one of the driving forces here might end up being people providing certified build processes, because they can be, so not one where you control the detail, but you basically, here's my code, turn it into a package, and it's all done for you.
Oh, GitHub Actions. Get on this.
GitHub Actions is on it. Persia, the Persia project is
So
on it. Lots of people are trying.
there's all sorts of options on the table for doing these things. Yeah.
Neat.
Yeah.
I like it. And then, so what about the story around containers? Because there's the provenance of the binary itself, and then all the layers in the.
Yeah. And so you've got to figure out not only that what's in the layer that you've got to figure out what's been hidden, because obviously you can't remove things, you just hide them. And then you've got to then connect to an arbitrary set of binaries inside a container and work out what the SBOM. The ultimate goal is that all SBOMs are joined, so that each SBOM can point to the digital signature of another SBOM. We're not there yet. Right now, we tend to do first level. Or with Java, we can do the dependency tree. Right. But if you point a tool at a Docker container, I don't believe, and you had Java in there, I don't believe you get a Java SBOM. You just get, I found Java SDK, blah, 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 as part of the SBOM. But again, it's all good steps, and people need to understand why we're doing this.
That's why Persia started with the Docker registry and said that they actually went straight to Docker images, because it was one of the harder problems to solve.
Yeah.
Pretty easy to solve when you can generate a dependency tree.
Yeah.
Even, to your point, any type of mid-step is an opportunity for somebody to come in and compromise that. Yeah. Which is why, having it at the build tool level really would be awesome for Gradle, maybe any of these things to be able to produce the SBOM right there. Because, being able to compromise that, sure, of course, it could be done. You could somehow get into the build API, or you could mess with the daemon. But
no, I think having what we've got, when we can generate them now and people get used to it, that's a good step. We get developers used to the fact that SBOMs come out and they can use them. One of the things we built recently, tool plug. It's called BOM Doctor. It's a free visualizer.
What is it?
BOM Doctor, BOM Doctor.
Oh, BOM,
Yeah.
Bill of Materials Doctor.
Yeah. So you can. The idea is you can go look at your Java BOM. So I mean, you can Google for it, but it's just an experimental tool we put together because it lets you visualize your dependency tree, and that's what SBOMs do for you. SBOMs give you the detail, and then you visualize it. And what's been interesting is showing that with developers, how often developers have no idea of how big their dependencies are. I mean, even though it's like you do Maven package, and you get that long list of stuff it's downloading.
Yeah.
And you say, oh, okay, shrug your shoulders. But once you start visualizing it, and you go, oh, that's connected to that, it's connected to that, and you go, oh, my choice brought in 10 other packages, and suddenly you feel like you're more in control.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah.
Well, and it underscores what we know too, which is, and you had brought the statistic out earlier, but that 90% of the average software project is just open source dependencies downloaded from God knows where.
Yeah.
That's where I do a whole talk on actually contributed a chapter to a book on software quality, talking about fuzzing.
Yeah.
And the case that I made, and we're way off, it's going to take time, but applying deep learning to evolutionary generative fuzzers, I think solves this problem in a totally different way, right? So whereas we could do a software bill of materials that infers, scans, logically puts together a bill of materials, a fuzzer with deep learning applied could actually just take any standalone theoretically, any standalone program that has never even seen before and start taking it through all these different execution paths, which could be recognized as potentially exploitable or vulnerable features by a deep neural network, by a network that's capable of doing recognition.
Yeah.
And then what you could do is you could have a fuzzer literally that's just like, okay, this software, I've now blasted in all these different inputs, and I'm using deep learning to evolve the inputs in a way that's causing interesting states to happen. And now I'm capturing those interesting states.
Yeah.
And I'm
So thanks for giving the bad guys ideas. But actually, that sort of thing that happens.
Yeah, I'm not. Of course it does. Yeah. I mean, that's how a lot of these vulnerabilities are discovered, right? Is through fuzzing. And I mean, Google has what, cluster fuzz that they're running
Can you say
against.
that?
Cluster fuzz.
Okay.
Cluster fuzz. Yeah. Which they're running against, like some multi tens of thousands of open source projects that they're fuzzing right now. There's a lot of vulnerabilities that come out of that. There's going to be interesting approaches that'll take automation. We used to employ a guy, Jonathan Lyshik. He works for the Open SSF now. But he worked for us for a little while in the build tool, and he's doing crazy things with code QL automation.
So, the thing is though, most of the problem isn't about the actual vulnerabilities of the open source projects. It's about the fact that the people who are using them don't update.
Yeah.
Right. So almost always, like Log4j. When Log4j came out, I know we said, oh, they announced it. There was a fix. So
Quick too.
yeah, pretty much every vulnerability out there is a version with a fix.
Yeah.
But it's the problem we have is people knowing that they actually have a problem. Hence what we see with Log4j, with 30% of people don't realize that they're still downloading old versions. And then when they do know, the actual proving they fixed it, because the number of companies who were going, are we affected? Don't know. Because they'll have the creative thing where they've got tools, like internal repos and things which have got controls on them, and they can manage that. And then you have the developers who've just gone straight off to public repos. Yeah. So you have companies going, I don't even know whether we have Log4j because we let our developers control their dependencies.
Do you see companies who, because theoretically, semantic versioning and dynamic patching on patch releases is like what this was built for, right? We're in a CI. We're saying, I will take any patch release of Log4j 1.2.x, whatever. The next time you build me, grab 2.6.17. Was that basically what the companies in the early echelon, you said that some of these companies had it fixed like within a day, 24, 48 hours, they were good. Yeah. Is that kind of the approach?
So I can't say I'm connected to the ones that we send the data for, but the people that I have talked to have highly automated processes.
Okay.
You know,
And
and
bot plus willingness to move up.
yeah,
Continuous
and
innovation.
good and not risky. It's like we have a test process. We
Yeah.
know what we can apply.
Well, blue green or whatever it is. I mean, like I'm just again thinking it should be as
The
easy
main
as-
thing is they are better understanding that they have the problem. It's very clear that they have a dependency and then they can fix it. And so again, this is, you know, it becomes, you know, I'll talk, it's all these chores that are coming down, which is and it's not really a chore in this case. It's you should have a better understanding of the dependencies you use. And your company desperately needs to have a better understanding of the dependencies you use. I mean, if not right now, because they're not trading with the US government, but at some point they'll be trading with somebody who is. And, you know, so we've been saying you need to start looking into this, because this pressure to coming down on you to do better software engineering, really, because that's what it is. There's nothing real rocket science here. This it's just like
And this also brings up you mentioned, do you want centralized versions for the whole organization, which I think is a terrible idea, because then nobody's going to move up and the whole organization's vulnerable.
Oh yeah.
But also you want like okay, some organizations say no, there's going to be by fiat, we're going to control dependencies, frameworks, libraries, protocols, Java versions, everything is just by one central, you know, ministerial architecture group. And then the other side of it is like Netflix, where just do you, but you wear the pager, right? So we'll call you at 3 a.m. if something's wrong.
Yeah.
There's no DevOps team or whatever, some nonsense like that. We can wake them up and they get called, right? Because you throw it over the
so
wall.
that model, those guys would never know about Log4j because nobody called them, because they're the only ones that know that they've got a vulnerability.
Wait, which model?
The Netflix model. So if you build it and you support it,
right,
unless you're applying the right level of rigor and checking this stuff, you're never going to know.
right. And but on the other hand, you also have the freedom to like embrace these processes, so the people that are not naturally inclined to do the right thing will be victim of that. But then, you know, I tend to think individual groups move faster than large organizations, just by definition. Even within large organizations, if you have the autonomy, you're going to pull in everything you can to make it so you can go to bed on time, right? Yeah. And not worry about getting through the nights without being disturbed. And I don't know. Is this need for legally mandated security? Is that going to like put businesses in a posture where they rein in developers and they enforce
that's the one of the big worries. One of the big worries that everybody talks about is what are the consequences of having to have this level of lockdown. And unfortunately, the Log4j thing got used as a great canonical example of how poor software engineering, you know, the Java community, I mean everybody, because it was just an example across the board of how poorly we managed the simplest thing.
And we're not even the worst.
Java space is great,
but it would be so to Java specifically. Yeah, I think it would be good if we could because again, a lot of people aren't going to know about this. I don't even know. I mean, how many people are having this conversation yet? You know, I was surprised just now to learn there's this looming deadline. To the extent that Gradle and Maven and other tools that are in the build pipeline, can eliminate or just automatically do it for you. You know, what things would need to be addressed? If I in 5 years, if I upgraded Maven and Gradle and my Docker tool, will it just automatically be done for me, or is there still more I need to be involved in? It's
going to depend on whether we need to go to integrated SBOM generation, whether we need the tools to generate SBOMs, because I think that's one level. But honestly, the way that we deal with this is we start going, those build processes that you lovingly crafted become less and less yours and more standardized, because that's an obvious way of controlling these things. It doesn't get in the way of developers. You can still make all the choices you want, but then you put your choices into a process that says yes. You know, and we've had a lot of luxury over the years about creating whatever build process we want.
The microeconomics are panning out though because platform engineering, right? I mean, effectively, that's the goal of a platform team, is to standardize, but also to include the security. But the irony of all of this, in my mind, we're going to be so locked down. It's like, well, actually, because to your point earlier about, especially in open source dependencies, with these vulnerabilities getting fixed pretty rapidly, what you want is to always be upgrading and to do that in an automated way. So the pipeline that I would envision, which is not rocket science either, and is exactly the kind of pipeline that they already have in a lot of these, savvy companies.
Right.
You've got semantic versioning saying, let's just make it easy for Log4j. Take 1.2.x, always 1.2.x, the newest version from Log4j whenever you're doing a build. Continuously be building every time there's a commit and a merge. So merge, build, downloads the newest versions of the dependencies at that point, according to semantic versioning, if there is a new one. So it would have automatically downloaded Log4j, whatever, 1.2.17. Release it in a service mesh, right? In a canary release, let 1% of the visitors see the new version. Oh, it broke, crap. Flip it back, right? Whatever it is, right? That is basically the DevSecOps pipeline, right?
Yeah, and what you're describing is the pragmatic thing that companies are going to rely on. So I don't want to be held responsible, but if there's a third-party company that will take that on for me, that I buy them and they guarantee that they won't provide things, they're responsible, and I can say as the person who could go to jail can say this company are the people I'm relying on. I am not shipping stuff unless they say it's clean. There's
indemnification effectively. But whoever would take on that business model, but too. I mean, so OpenLogic, when I was at OpenLogic, we tried this. We tried doing indemnification, not for vulnerability. This was more for if somebody got sued for misunderstanding the way they were supposed to adhere to a particular copyleft license or something like that, right? But we were going to indemnify them court costs up to a certain point, and we just could not make the business model work. Where it was like the fees in these things with the enterprise customers we were dealing with, one indemnification case could have wiped us out. So it's who is going to be the entity that will step up and do that?
Because we don't know, because until these laws are actually in place and then they get tried in court, we don't know.
Yeah,
but I also don't like the idea that we're creating a cottage industry around a new regulatory practice that will benefit or advantage the IBMs and not the little companies. Right? They have the golf games and money to.
It's an excellent point. It's an excellent point.
I want to have to buy another thing from another vendor.
So then you start. Because the other option is you stop using open source.
Right.
No, thank you.
Screw that.
That's terrible.
Stop using open source.
And then back in the bottle.
You have no vulnerabilities. Because nobody can report vulnerabilities on your binary, your black box stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean it depends, right? I mean, it's been there are commercial software platforms that have CVEs listed, and they never get fixed. They linger for years.
Another business opportunity for people to take open source. Fork it and turn it into a binary.
I mean, it wouldn't be unprecedented. Look at FIPS OpenSSL, right? I mean,
I could take Spring Framework, fork it, change the names, and ship it, and it would never have a vulnerability.
That anybody knew.
There's always around this, but so it's such early days.
Wow.
And as I said, everybody is trying to figure out enormous conversations about policy, because that's what it's about. How do we come up with a policy that will work? Because nobody wants to stop the open source engine, because as I said, 90% of modern applications are open source, because everybody relies on that enormous stack. So nobody wants to stop that.
I mean, the idea of you can't. Okay, what's the alternative to Linux these days? Realistically, there's no way to do what you're saying. We're joking. We're being glib, people. You can't actually go close source anymore.
FreeBSD.
I
was just saying.
That's open source.
But it's not Linux.
But you think about this. Goes every piece of open source. So that's down to the open source in the routers. The whole thing.
Even Intel has Minix in the chips. Did you see that?
Oh yeah, that's crazy. I saw that.
Yeah.
Well, and God knows what. I mean, Cisco's been putting all types of Apache and permissive open source on their stuff for years.
All of this are targets.
Yeah,
so
of course.
We have to be better at it. So SBOMs are first.
So even if I fix my software, my chips are going to get me in trouble.
Yeah. Oh, we could tell you all sorts of wonderful stories about how compromised yours.
Speculative.
Your hardware is day one. So the other thing is there's a lot more than SBOMs coming. So they were looking at starting to mandate memory safe programming languages, things like that.
No, that's interesting.
You know, so there's a whole lot. There's a long list of how the bad guys do what they do, and it's like, how do you shut the doors?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I had a really interesting conversation with a guy named Soren who works for Bloomberg, but he's on one of the security boards for the Apache Software Foundation. And we started a conversation that I would like to finish. That we just other stuff has happened, but we talked about people who are into builds, Gradle, Maven, Bazel, SBT, NPM, CMake, all these. We need to kind of get together and put together sort of an open build standards initiative. And the idea would be, and you could build these same security compliance kind of regulations into them too. It's like we were thinking more functional things like you should have a build cache. If you're a build tool and you want to be open build tool standard compliant, you should have a build cache, right? You should be able to detect flaky tests. You should run a daemon instead of starting from scratch every time. Just things like that.
Sounds very familiar.
Yeah. You should be more like Gradle. So no, or Bazel. I could also say Bazel. So, but the idea then is that you would have an open standard that's like, hey, you're going to put a build tool together. You should have these things, and I could see that being a natural place for some of this security mandate to live.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Have you tried? I was thinking about Dagger. Or, you know, I love GitHub Actions.
Yeah.
I love GitHub Actions, but Dagger is this. It's from Solomon Hikes, the guy. Docker. And it's like a GitHub action. It's an open source GitHub Actions.
Yeah.
You describe the whole pipeline, and you can use GraphQL.
I never actually tried it before. I remember reading
It's
about it.
pretty neat,
Pretty cool.
and but it's open source, and you can basically I can run it on my local machine. I can run GitHub Actions. It's not GitHub Actions.
But it's similar. Yeah.
Same idea, same scope. You could swap one for the other.
I mean, GitHub Actions, our unrestrained use of them, great opportunity for bad guys.
Sure, but yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, all powerful things are right. It's.
I know it's our unfettered use of these things.
Sure.
Then you know, because you say to somebody, "Oh, use GitHub Actions." Yeah, okay. So, what GitHub Action are you using? Oh, well, I found this one on the web.
Right.
You know, and it's like,
oh
yeah,
it's equivalent to still. I mean, what we do all the time. You know, downloading a shell script and
Yeah.
executing it.
Oh,
Or even maybe Central. I found this thing. Or this generate as the code. So,
yeah,
you know,
but the whole.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me started on the number of things you get. People go, well, just cut and paste this, and
Awesome.
you know, it's you know, bash, pseudo bash, blah blah blah.
No.
Yeah. So
No.
don't do that. Yeah.
Yeah, but ultimately, though, I mean, I think it's going to have to come. I mean, if there's a standard and it's some type of I mean, it's going to have to be open source because how else are people going to trust it? You know what I mean? Like if you have a closed source SBOM generator, I mean, you have no way of publicly third party and with zero trust validating that software does what it's supposed to do.
Well, I know, but you can also claim that if people build non-open source solutions, they are, you know, going to be safer than yeah. The problem is we have with the open source is, 90% of your application comes from open source. Yeah, but that means that 90% of your application is shared with other people.
Oh, I understand.
So that's targets.
But see, now that's that paradox though too, because Linus Torvald would invoke many eyes at that point and say, no, what you're actually dealing with is something that's more secure because you have more white hats looking at it and fixing it.
And honestly, when we in the scheme of things right now, Java, Log4j came out. Log4j was a vulnerability that was based on an over enthusiastic design feature. Right?
So easy.
And so Java's better positioned because you can't put packages up unless you own the domain name. Whereas so the controls are better. We have strong typing, all that sort of stuff. If you're in Python space or Node space, it's much worse.
Oh yeah,
because anybody can publish anything.
Well, you don't. I mean, at the very least, you still have that abstraction from the rest of the operating system, and that's in the JVM. I mean, I know that's getting grayer and grayer as we get further along, but you still have that
indirection,
that
decoupling.
Yes, exactly.
It's still thing. So you download a node package.
Yes.
It might have a package.json in it with a script to run.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of
I know.
And the main thing is you get typo squatting, you get dependency confusion, you get all these different types of attack. and they're made easier because the ecosystem allows them to happen.
Yeah.
And so when they're really easy, you get what we see now. So what I mean, Sonatype does, like in some of the other companies, but is constantly looking for malware in these repos, and we're constantly submitting takedown requests because you find all these bot generated packages. It's just like millions and thousands.
GPT is going to make it worse.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Good. That's
Because I mean, you could have a whole bot just sitting there typo squatting on every freaking open source library ever, and all it would have to do is generate.
oh, they don't just type a squat on on open source code. Well, the other thing they do is what they're looking for is the name of internal packages.
Oh, sure.
Because then they can put one up on
Yeah.
the thing. Because most people, when they're downloading,
Wow.
right,
Yeah.
download public first.
Oh, it's com.ibm
Yeah.
authentication.
Yeah.
It's our stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So you can't do that with Java because you have to do that.
Yeah,
Right?
sure.
But other packages.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be super easy to exploit that in with Python.
Yeah.
So wait, okay, we gotta wrap it up on that bombshell. Is there any good news?
The good news is developer productivity engineering will allow you to fail a lot faster.
I saw a Fireship video the other week, and the closing admonition was, learn to mine. Like we're all gonna lose our jobs anyway. The AI is gonna take over everything. Time to learn mining.
Learn basic skills.
I think the thing
Mining
is,
for coal, not
Yeah.
cryptocurrency.
the takeaway, because I mean, I think our talk is positive. Okay, yeah,
It is.
there is this stuff coming, right? And it's coming, and you've had all your development managers have said don't do security testing, stuff like that. Well, you're going to get told to do it, and if you actually start applying some of the security, some of the software engineering principles that you may have forgotten, and you start looking at more of the data that's available for making your choices, you can make better choices. You can be more productive,
Right.
and be safe.
So if people wanted to learn more about this, what are some resources on the internet that you point people to, both of you?
Oh, well, that's a good one. Well, obviously, you can come to sonatype.com.
Sonatype.
Oh, don't you've got me.
SONA.
It's okay, Steve.
.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sonatype.com. Yes. That's probably the simplest thing. Or just tap me up if I'm on LinkedIn or.
Next question.
Yeah.
Are you on the internet?
I am on the
Do you want
internet.
to be found? And if so, where can people find you?
So my Twitter handle is at SPOOLE167.
What's the 167?
When I signed up for Twitter, I wanted Spool, and they said no, and they gave me a suggestion, and one they gave me was 167. So I went, I'll have that because why not?
Sure.
And that was, we had only been going for 5 minutes, so
Yeah.
I had no idea, and I never changed it since.
If it works, it works.
Yeah.
Okay. Spool 167. SPOOLE.
Yeah.
167.
Yep,
That's on the Twitters.
that's on Twitter.
That's gonna implode very soon, is what I'm told. Is there like?
No,
You signed up for the Mastodon
no,
yet?
not yet.
Yeah. Okay. Fair.
Yeah.
I mean, did you see they changed it to Doge? There's a Doge icon.
I saw that. It's
Is everything a joke? It's all a joke. It's all in fire. Okay.
He's doing it all for the lulz. I'm telling you.
And it's
Yeah,
working, but
yeah.
also
At the billionaire scale.
what this.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So developer productivity engineering, the best source of information is at Gradle.com right now. That you can just Google that term. You will see that some other companies, like after really pushing this for a long time, you're starting to see some other companies underneath this blanket terminology, which is great. That, no secret, that is really my mission. It's not so much to push Gradle Enterprise. We've got, although it's a great product, but we have sellers that can do that. My job is really to proliferate this notion of developer productivity engineering. So if you want to learn more about that, Gradle.com. We have a book.
Com
So-
or
.com. Yeah, .com.
Yeah, and I was saying so the 2 other promos.
Yeah.
What? So we're at Devnexus. You're at Devnexus.
Yeah.
yes, we are.
For anybody who's coming to Devnexus, come to the booth because at some point this week we're giving
Sonatype booth.
Sonatype booth. We are giving away free cocktails.
Oh,
I love free.
We have
And
2 different
cocktails.
cocktails. We have 2 different cocktails. You do your bit, and I'll tell you what the name of the cocktails are.
yeah, for sure. Well, we are, by the way, right next to each other at Devnexus too, which is great.
Yeah.
So if you want to come see Sonatype, you can also see Gradle. We'll be right there. But Steve and I are.
Giving away coffee because
Yeah.
that's a one-stop shop.
We're giving away gum, actually. We decided to do gum.
I'm gonna go say his.
Yeah.
We do, we do two cocktails. One's called Bombshell.
Bombshell.
Yeah, and the other one's called Dependent Dilemma.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Any
One's vodka and one's bourbon.
Yes.
I'll
Sign
do
me
a
up.
bourbon. Yeah.
I'll have them both.
And that's good because we have two.
Yeah.
Well, we have
So,
more than two, but
Gradle.com booths. We have our happy hour Wednesday.
Yeah.
Tomorrow we're gonna do it at Der Beer Garden.
we got a talk.
We got our talk tomorrow.
Tomorrow,
1:30. 1:30.
Atlanta time.
Atlanta
Yeah, it's not being streamed, so hurry up and fly here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Get here.
I saw somebody with some Chinese script in their names. That's probably gonna be a bit of a flight.
You
But
could be here in 19 hours.
You can make it.
Yep.
Maybe.
You make it with.
Could be already.
Could be. Yeah.
So I'd suggest it.
Okay.
Yeah. What else? I think that's pretty much that's enough. We're gonna have some new stuff soon. We're building out a .org site for DPE. We're gonna be bringing in partners, signatories, all these things. So if this does resonate with you and you're like, yeah, I love this and I want to be in this space, reach out to you because we have a whole bunch of exciting partner stuff that we're going to be doing this year. So, and when we actually have bandwidth to do it, it's not just me. So,
All right.
all right.
Cool.
Thank you,
Josh.
Josh.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. It always is.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you next stream.